So there'll just be there we go.
Well, diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you very much for joining us. It's a great honour to welcome you here tonight. I'm just going to apologise first of all that my Zoom connection can be a little bit temperamental, so I may have to switch my camera off. It's an honour to welcome you here tonight to the launch of our collection for Empathy Wales, and it's the first collection ever. My name is Bethan Hughes and I'm main librarian in Denbighshire. I've followed the growth of EmpathyLab and its very important work for a number of years. This year, I was given the pleasure of being one of the judges to choose the books for this collection. This evening, you're going to hear from a number of different speakers, and at the end, we'll have a Q&A session. So please put any questions or comments in the chat box as we go, and then we'll ask them at the end. I'm sure you'll agree that there has never been as much demand for empathy as there is currently. As a society and as a world, it is likely that we won't know the effects of the pandemic for many years to come, but also already we are hearing of its effects on children's skills and also on high levels of anxiety. Of course, the horrendous situation in Ukraine is also very important to consider. In 2022, therefore,
berthyn sy'n dod gyda empathy ac i'w harfogi
we
nhw
have to consider the importance of empathy, and we need to transfer this very important skill to children if they are to prosper and grow and contribute towards building a kinder and less divided world. I'd like to ask Miranda Mckerney, the founder of EmpathyLab, to tell us a little bit more about their work and this collection.
Lovely, thanks so much, Bethan. It's noswaith dda. It's really lovely to be with you all. So EmpathyLab's really proud to be working with a growing number of schools and libraries in Wales, such a powerful partnership in response to the new curriculum's emphasis on health and well-being, and empathy appears 35 times. So we'll be hearing from one of the teachers we're working with on our empathy education programme, and lovely to have so many other teachers and librarians with us. So we offer this bilingual collection as a first step towards developing an equitable list of titles in both the Welsh and English languages. We see it as a very practical tool because, as you'll see, these 17 carefully chosen books can help us all surround children with empathy experiences at a time when empathy, as Bethan says, has surely never been needed more. And so these amazing books are there for us to use just when we need them most. And I'm going to just quickly share my screen and hope that you can all see that. Is that okay, Paul? Yeah, great. So I want first to highlight two key areas of scientific research which underpin EmpathyLab's work and our mission, which is to raise an empathy-educated generation. Firstly, that empathy is learnable. We're not just born with a fixed quantity. Only 10% of our empathic ability is genetic. And secondly, that reading is a really important empathy building tool. Scientific research shows that because of how stories activate so many areas of the brain, reading feels incredibly real. So when we identify with the feelings of book characters, we build our real life understanding of other people. I think that's just so cool. In selecting this Read for Empathy collection, we've been greatly helped by our partners at the Books Council for Wales and also by this great panel of experts from schools and libraries. Thank you to you all. These are the criteria we use to select our Read for Empathy books. We're looking for books which can play a very specific empathy building role, and that might be helping children name and share emotions, or building their understanding of how it might be to live in a difficult life circumstance, like having experienced a bereavement, might be books which shake us out of our awful human tendency to judge and other people. So to the collection, there are 17 books for 4 to 16-year-olds, and this free guide can be downloaded from our website. The books are listed in rough age order. We're keen to see picture books used at all ages, including secondary. Thank you so much to book supplier Peters for the help with this leaflet. You've been wonderful. To obtain the books, you go to your usual independent bookseller, to Peters, or of course to your local library. I'm going to hand over now to Morgan, who was one of the judges, who's going to take us through some of the books. Over to you, Morgan.
Diolch, Miranda.
Thank you, Miranda. This is going to be a very quick snapshot of the books. What's fantastic about empathy is that it enables us to relate to other people's experiences and in a way to feel how they feel. And by doing this, it helps us to understand other people's situations. In Monsters Not Allowed, a monster creates trouble in a school and is expelled. We see how the children and the teachers' lives are enriched from having him in the school, and they miss him greatly when he goes. We need to learn to be tolerant. That's the message in this book. Then we have Together We Can, which is a picture book which is very popular. It's written in rhyme and shows children from all over the world doing different activities. It's a colourful and warm book with a very important message that our differences are a source of strength and something to celebrate. Then we have Ysodd Garw. In a community that fears this mysterious creature, one little girl is very brave and is willing to learn the truth. She cares for the creature and realizes that he is very gentle. The message is that we should never be scared of something that we do not know. The next slide, please. Next, we have Worry Angels, a book which is written in a dyslexia-friendly format and discusses anxiety in a very sensitive way. Then we have Sweep, or Skibber, which tells us about a young boy who's not in a very good mood, and he's in such a bad mood that he is unable to shake it off, something I'm sure that we can all relate to at some point. This is a very useful book for holding a conversation about processing feelings and emotions with young children. Then move on to Scrambled, which takes us to the very exciting world of sport and motorbikes. David is a very conscientious boy, but he develops his confidence as he discovers scrambling. It talks about themes such as family relations, bereavement, and bullying. And then we have Zoo Saramai, the book that won the Tir na Nog Prize last year. This is a story about a little girl who owns and lives in a zoo. She has lots of fun with the animals, but also it deals with racism and bullying. Next slide, please. Boy Overboard is the first one here. This is a book that discusses modern social themes such as refugees. One of these is Boy Overboard, which is a very sad book that tells us about the experience of a brother and sister who are refugees from Afghanistan. I think we will all agree that this is a very relevant theme considering what we are seeing happening in Ukraine at the moment, and is evidence that we need empathy now more than ever. Another special book is Those People Next Door, a colourful book that first at first glance may appear very simple, but it has a very powerful message that's a lesson for us all. Football brings people from different races together and emphasizes the fact that we should never judge people based on how they look. And then we have the boy at the back of the class. This book tells us about the author's direct experiences from working with refugees in Calais. We follow the journey of Ahmet, a young refugee from Syria, who arrives in Britain without his parents. The novel talks about kindness and also some of the prejudices that still exist towards refugees. So that's a very quick overview for you of the books on the list. So you'll see that there's a great variety. Thank you. Thank you, Morgan. Empathy has a key role to play as we understand the past as well and try to avoid repeating the hatred and prejudices of the past. In Cafe Morelli from Gia Jimin, we see the experiences of Italian people who moved to the South Wales valleys. And we see the efforts of one boy bringing a varied community together. In The Darkest of Days by Gareth F. Williams, we learn about the story of the Llanghennydd colliery accident and A Quilt by Valérie Leblond tells us about the trauma of economic migrancy when a family searches for a better life in America. They are reminded of their connection to each other as they reach their new home. Empathy can also help with family issues, and there are two books by Nicola Davis and Kathy Fisher on the list, which will help children to understand their emotions and feelings. Perfect tells us about the complex emotions that a young boy feels when his sister is born with a disability. And in The Pond, we see a very emotional book looking at death and also aspects from nature. Next slide, please. Then we have some fantastic characters as well, and relating to the feelings of the characters can definitely help to build empathy and will help young people to understand how other people feel, people other than themselves. The characters such as Rachel, the very memorable goth in Helent by Rebecca Roberts. She won't let anyone stop her and never loses empathy towards other people. And then we have Dylan in The Blue Book of Nebo, who survives after the end with his mother in a relationship full of respect, even in the face of tragedy.
So it now gives me a great pleasure, having given you a flavour of the books in the collection, to introduce our next speaker, Kate Clark from Pembroke Dock Community School. She has been part of a cluster working with EmpathyLab in-depth school programme, and she's going to tell us more about this vitally important work. Kate.
Diolch. I lead health and wellbeing and EmpathyLab in Pembroke Dock Community School, which is a large primary school in a deprived area of West Wales. At the end of 2019, our cluster of schools met to discuss a way forward to improve behaviour in the secondary school that we feed into. In our school, we'd worked on projects focusing on raising pupils' self-esteem. However, we felt that pupils still found it difficult to think of the feelings and the needs of others. We felt that we needed to embed better behaviours in our pupils as lifelong skills. They were still struggling to think of the needs of others, so we really wanted to explore their behaviours as a means of communication and understand their needs whilst building self-esteem and responsibility. In January 2020, we began our journey with EmpathyLab using their empathy education programme. We could immediately see the need for our pupils to form strong empathy skills, otherwise they would struggle to form the strong relationships that they would need in order to learn and thrive in this ever-changing world. And it was one of those light bulb moments for us as we could see a way of using text to develop empathy skills and the feeling of safety that all pupils need in order to learn. We bought the recommended texts in the Read for Empathy collections, and each class had a set of books, and we began to use them as our end of the day reads for empathy. And it was a lovely feeling to put our do not disturb signs on our doors and really get lost in a story. We launched the Empathy Project with a huge virtual assembly showing videos on the difference between empathy and sympathy, and ensuring that our pupils were aware that empathy wasn't a topic, it was really forming part of the ethos of our school. We joined together for a whole school topic called Don't Hate, Educate, and we looked at the incidents of racism across the school, and it was a real eye-opener for the staff because we could immediately see the need to address this as a whole school. We also had the local context to the topic, as a nearby MOD site was being utilised as a refugee camp, and members of our community were forming part of the demonstrations taking place against refugees in our locality. So we really wanted our pupils to have the skills to question what they were seeing, not just to accept it. I also had the opportunity to introduce the staff to resources on the EmpathyLab website to help us on this journey, including book talk questions and roll on the wall templates and whole school display resources to help us plan our topic. Each of the year groups based their learning on a text, and this is something that we used to do as a school but had moved away from. We also planned to improve pupils' reading for pleasure and their enjoyment of books. We felt that sometimes the curriculum took us away from enjoying a good book, and we were really keen for pupils to fully engage in our empathy texts, which were more diverse and more contemporary than books that we had sometimes before. In foundation phase, we used a range of texts, including Sylvie by Lupita Nyong'o, to explore the differences and the similarities between people. And it was really amazing to hear the discussions between 5-year-olds connecting with the texts and beginning to put themselves in other people's shoes and understanding the characteristics that make us all unique. And I think that gave me a better understanding of how text can be used to really connect people and work through those difficult moments together. Year 5 were engrossed in The Boy at the Back of the Class by Njali Ralph. And as I said earlier, you know, it's a powerful text giving a child's perspective on the refugee crisis, highlighting the importance of friendship and kindness in a world that doesn't always make sense. Our Year 6 pupils also read a range of diverse empathy texts, including books by Rashmi Sir-Deshpande. And EmpathyLab were amazingly helpful in linking us with Anjali and Rashmi so that our pupils could meet up with them virtually. And they were able to ask them pertinent questions about the writing process and what inspired them to write. And they learned how authors are able to weave empathy through their texts and how they build character. And exploring those empathy texts enabled our pupils to build their literacy skills, but also in turn their social and their emotional skills. Our pupils were able to question racism that they were seeing and hearing at the time in the community and also in the news. And it really deepened their sense of empathy and also their solidarity with people who are facing inequality on a daily basis. The subjects that we covered were ones that we previously felt that we wouldn't have discussed, but we knew that in order to create that culture shift and an era of social activism, that they really needed to be discussed. If a book has a message, we found that we shouldn't shy away from discussing the message in order to improve pupils' emotional literacy. We found then that pupils were able to call out racism, both in school and in the community themselves, which was a huge step forward from where we were. And this has really continued to form part of the ethos of our school. We found our empathy texts were hugely beneficial during home learning, during COVID, and we continue to read to pupils during live check-ins to ensure they were still being immersed in a diverse range of texts. And we were told by parents that this also reduced their children's feelings of isolation during this uncertain time. On return to school during the pandemic, we found, like many other schools, that A high proportion of our pupils were suffering from emotional and mental health difficulties, ranging from separation anxiety to loss, bereavement, and trauma. Our empathy texts were needed more than ever as a key tool in opening up many difficult conversations that we were having with pupils. Many of our pupils were frustrated and anxious due to the isolation that they had suffered from, being separated from family and friends, and also their school network. So through exploring book characters and putting names to feelings, they realised it's okay not to be okay. And we were able to implement strategies to help and support them through these unprecedented times. We were also able to target individual pupils for support using our empathy text to discuss emotional reactions, self-regulation, and other anxieties linked to the pandemic. In the lead up to Empathy Day last year, we carried out a whole school project to involve families in our empathy work. Families carried out empathy walks in our local community, and they were able to put feelings to each part of their walk. They identified how they could carry out empathy resolutions to make a change in our community. They created videos of their resolutions, and we posted these on our social media platforms in the run-up to Empathy Day. Empathy Day was a huge celebration in our school, and we loved using the EmpathyLab resources, including the author shorts and watching authors talking about their books on video clips. We were extremely lucky to take part in an interview with Kwame Alexander, and he really inspired our pupils and opened up their eyes to the writing process, whilst learning more about strength and passion and the bravery of some of the world's greatest artists and athletes and activists. And there was a real buzz in the air, like electricity, around the school that day, and every child from nursery upwards that I spoke to could describe what empathy was and also why it's important. We're currently learning about the global goals as part of our whole school topic. And in year 1 where I teach, we've been reading It's a No Money Day by Kate Milner. And my class really empathised with a family who had to use a food bank, and we're interested to learn more about food banks in our local community. The Trussell Trust joined us to talk about their work, and this inspired our pupils to write letters to our head teacher, asking if we could create a food share in our main reception for any members of our community in need. So my class are currently pricing up fridges and cupboards and creating posters to welcome the community into our school to the food share. And this really is true empathy in action that was sparked by an empathy text. And this social action was led by 5- and 6-year-olds, so not even the oldest pupils in our school. And that really makes me glow with pride. The OECD highlights the pivotal role that social and emotional skills will play in new kinds of jobs, cohesive societies, and economic growth. The autonomy of our new Welsh curriculum has truly allowed us to ensure that our pupils leave us with equally weighted bags of both academic and social and emotional skills. Our pupils in Pembroke Dock Community School have had access to a more diverse range of texts than ever before, which has helped them understand and value other people's lives and perspectives. And we can see that authors are powerful catalysts in our drive to develop empathy skills through texts. EmpathyLab have really helped us harness this power and place empathy truly at the heart of our school. And I believe that every school and organisation should take the opportunity to harness the true power of empathy. Thank you.
Oh, diolch yn fawr iawn, Kate.
Thank you very much, Kate.
So interesting, diolch yn fawr. A cofiwch os oes gennych chi
Don't
unrhyw...
forget, if you have any questions you'd like to ask any of our speakers, then please put them in the chat box so that we can ask them later on. It's now a great pleasure to present our special guest this evening, the fantastic author Manon Stefan Ross. She's one of our most prominent authors for adults and children alike, and everyone loves her books. She's a former winner of Gwobr Tir na Nog Prize. She's won many major prizes at the National Eisteddfod, and has just been, one of her works has just been included on the shortlist for the Tir na Nog Award this year. When the judges were selecting books for this collection this year, as it happens, it was at the same time as the Blue Book of Nebo was published in English, and we all felt that it should be included on the list. And there are 2 other books by Manon also in the collection, The People Next Door and Ysodd Garw. So welcome, Manon, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you for inviting me. Could we start by looking at perspective taking? This is one of the core empathy skills that EmpathyLab does a lot of work on with schools, seeing the world through the eyes of others. And characters in books are a brilliant way of doing this, of course. And in the Blue Book of Nebo, the characters are powerfully drawn. Could you tell us a little bit about your inspiration for creating Dylan and his mother? The characters come first when I write, to be honest. I never really plan the story, and I never know what's going to happen at the end when I start writing. But as I write about any character, it's a very natural part of the process for me to imagine the character and try to work out if I feel I would like the reader to like the character or not. And then I look at it from the other side. And if there's a character that I like, I have to find the imperfections within that character. But more importantly, if I'm writing about a character that I'm not particularly fond of, it's very important for me, in order to create a character that feels real, to find something to love about that character. So for me, it's really the most key part of creating a story is finding something to love about the baddies I create. So as I created Dylan or Sean, I tried to include some things to love and some things that we could hate, because then they felt more real. There's a lot of natural empathy when people are neither goody or a baddie. They fall somewhere in between. Thank you. There's another one of your books in the collection, The People Next Door, which is a brilliant caricature of a community of green creatures who don't like the fact that some purple creatures moved in next door. We included this because it shows children in a very creative and hilarious way how quickly humans think of other and think in terms of tribes. What are your thoughts on the book and its capacity for empathy building? I feel that The People Next Door was one of the things I really wanted to include in that is the first response, even of the main character who he likes, feels suspicion at the beginning, because the creatures next door have a different colour skin, speak a different language, and they come from another culture. And that feeling of suspicion, that does exist, but that we can turn it around once we recognise the things that we have in common, but also celebrate what is different between us, of course. Jack Jones, who illustrated the book, and when I was working with him, we were determined to include a lot of colour and fun and some cartoonish characters. And when the children who read it don't really understand what's behind the story at the beginning, they see it as something quite fun. We didn't want anyone to feel that they were being told off when reading the book. Sometimes a book can be quite heavy, and it can make a child feel they're doing something wrong if they have these feelings. But with The People Next Door, I really wanted to create something that felt fun to read, and it was nothing to do with being told off or anything. That was really important. And I wanted to teach them about other ways of welcoming people who are different from us. Do you think that children's authors and illustrators have an important role to play in building children's empathy? And why do you think that's important? Sorry, I managed to mute myself somehow. The story is all important in creating empathy, because that's the only way we can learn about other people's experiences is by learning about their stories. It doesn't matter how we get those stories. It can be in a book or on television or on news or through Twitter, in any way. But the difference with a book is that you can't do anything else at the same time. You have to immerse yourself in the story. You can't listen to the radio at the same time. You can't look at your phone at the same time. You have to just completely lose yourself in the story. And for me, being able to just sink into a completely different world and into people's minds who may be completely different from yourself, or of course, people who are similar to you, but that there's something slightly different about the way they feel about the world around them and the people around them. I think that's such an effective way, and I use it myself when I write. I sometimes realize that I don't have much empathy towards a certain type of character, and I have to address that and change that. So the process I go through is very similar. Is there a character from a book in your past that has helped you see through the eyes of others? Yes, there are quite a few, to be honest, but there is a character in Asodd Garw that's very interesting, because it's a story about a monster who lives on the edge and everyone's scared of him, and the little girl goes to him and asks him to stop stealing everything. And it's that fear. When I was writing the story, I don't think I quite realized exactly what I was writing. But when it came back with the illustrations, I realized that it was about a fear that we have of things that are different from us. And it's a huge fear. And if we live in a community that tells us to feel like this towards a certain type of person or a certain type of situation, it's so easy to be caught up in that and to think, okay, that's how I'm supposed to feel. I'm supposed to feel scared. And it's such a help when you read. I always have to give myself that challenge of asking myself whether I feel like this really, or is it because the community around me is telling me that that's how I should feel, or because Twitter is telling me that I should feel in a certain way. And I know that we're talking about young children here, but these influences can have even a greater effect on children, even though they're not on social media yet. It's just part of our community. And the lack of empathy that is around is just incredible and huge. So this collection is very timely and very important, and the fantastic work that EmpathyLab is doing with schools and libraries. I'd like to thank you very much, Manon. Unfortunately, we don't have time to ask you anything else.
I'm going to call Miranda back in now to talk about Empathy Day 2022.
Lovely. Thanks so much, Bethan. I'm just going to hope my slides are going to move on. Yes, great. So this is a real quick canter, and then hopefully we'll have a chance for a few questions at the end. So Empathy Day is on the 9th of June. These are its aims. We aim to help young people learn more about empathy, be inspired to put it into action, and have transformational empathy experiences through stories. In 5 years' time, we're aiming to reach 1 million children a year. This year's theme is Empathy, Our Human Superpower. And if you think about it, it's just remarkable that we have mirror neurons in our brains that connect us to each other and help us understand each other. Truly a superpower. So there are 3 main campaign strands this year to Empathy Day: the Empathy Collection with the book collection, the Welsh and English one. Some original content from some wonderful authors and illustrators, empathy shorts, 500-word stories, new illustrations from some of our leading illustrators. These are free. Then there's the Empathy Superpower Challenge, which I'll say more about in a minute. 9 creative empathy boosting activities led, we hope, by you in your communities. And then an online festival, which Manon appears in, to be streamed into homes, schools and libraries on the day itself. So the festival, this is the programme, the most glorious array of authors doing the 9 activities in the Superpower Challenge. And as I say, that can be streamed into wherever you're working and also used afterwards and watched. So the Superpower Challenge, we're really excited about this. We want everybody to get going on it from the 4th of May. And the 9 activities are very practical, can help everybody boost that superpower, because empathy is like a muscle. The more you use it, the more it grows. And there's a badge, a downloadable badge for people who've done 3 of the activities, and a Michael Rosen signed certificate for people who get through all 9. So every year we issue the same calls to action: to read, to connect and to act. And this year, the 9 challenge activities are grouped under these headings, 3 under each. And just to give you a few examples, in the read section, we're creating a massive crowdsourced empathy book recommendation campaign, asking everybody to post pictures of their recommended book in a kind of dramatic power pose and to share that online. In the connect section, there's a listening switch activity to practice this key aspect of empathy, and empathy walks, which is one of the things Manon will be doing. In the act section, there's a nomination activity for those empathy superheroes in our communities quietly getting on with making life better. So we want to recognise and celebrate them. And probably the most important activity in the challenge is empathy resolutions at the end, because there's no point doing any of this unless we're going to put it into action. We will have free toolkits at the end of March for all of this, for early years, primary and secondary schools and public libraries. And I'll say a bit more how to get hold of those in a minute. Just a quick look at the authors who'll be doing their empathy walks. There's lots of examples already on our website if this interests you, and you'll see Manon here. Before I finish, I just want to flag our in-depth schools programme. We have an 18-month programme, which Kate Schools has been doing, a 6-month one, and an alumni programme. You can educate for empathy, and we'd love to be partnering more and more schools in doing just that. This final slide has our contact details if you want to get in touch. There's an absolutely critical action for anybody wanting to take part in Empathy Day. You need to subscribe to our newsletter. Really easy from our homepage, and that will allow you to register at the end of March for all the free resources. I'm really proud of the super creative ways we're offering everybody to help build the transformational skill of empathy, which we so very badly need us. And we'd really like you to join us in helping make Empathy Day enormous, and then thereafter doing all we can to spread empathy through books. So thank you. Over to you, Bethan.
Diolch yn fawr, Miranda.
Thank you, Miranda.
To take us through any questions that have come in.
Well, I would be doing that, except we haven't had any questions that have come in. So if you do have a question, please feel free to pop it into the chat. We've obviously heard from a range of speakers this evening, whether it's Kate talking from an education point of view. We've been expertly guided through the books by yourself, Beth and Morgan, and of course, Manon giving us an absolutely fantastic insight into the writer's view of how empathy can develop things. I've got a question for, oh, here we go. We have got, look at that. It saves me answering a question. Thank you, Hannah, for coming in, my knight in shining armor. Will some of the activities on the Empathy Day be in Welsh? I think that's very much a Miranda question.
Yes, we're going to try to have translated resources for all the things that face outward to children and families. We are a very small organisation. We're mostly run by volunteers still. And we hope eventually to get the funding to translate everything in Welsh always. But for this year, probably what we'll be doing is, as I say, making the family pack available in Welsh, which is going to be a brilliant resource, and all the downloadables and everything that you would want to be using with children.
Thanks, Miranda. Ruth's actually got a question with regards to empathy walks, and I'm going to Kate Clark. I think you're still around, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Hiya, Kate. Now you did empathy walks last year with your children, didn't you? Can you just explain that process of empathy walks for everybody?
Yeah. I modelled it first of all. I went out on an empathy walk myself before I asked our children and families to do it. And when I went out on my walk in the locality, I looked at things. For example, I saw cars parked across dropped curbs, and I immediately felt empathy for people who had mobility issues. And I thought, if I were them, how would I feel about that? I walked down to my local park. I could see litter that had been blown across the park, and I felt empathy for people who had to pick up the litter as part of their job. And also I felt empathy for the environment as well, and the impact that was having. So I created a video and showed it to the pupils and the families. They went out and they then created their own videos, and they mapped it out as well. So they drew a map and it showed their route that they walked along, and they put like little emojis or hearts and things showing their feelings at different points during their walk. And then at the end of that, then they made an empathy resolution, and they said what they would do to try and stop that. So for example, picking up the litter or educating people. So our families in our locality were thinking about that form of social action that they could put into place.
And having seen some of those walks, it was lovely to see the children actually being spurred on to action, like you said, you know, those litter picking groups that just wouldn't have existed unless they'd been out and seeing and feeling the world around them. And that was fantastic. Oh, it's fantastic to make a version for Forest School. I mean, that would be an amazing thing. And we've got, there's lots of books in the wider empathy collection as well that focus on the environment as well. So yes, definitely great choices there. I'm gonna hand you back, I believe, to Miranda, because we're just coming up to time. We've had just a couple of questions there at the end.
Yeah, lovely. I will leave it to Bethan to say goodnight to everybody, but we will stay on screen if anybody has any questions. And yeah, really just a rallying cry. Let's all get together and use the power of literature to spread empathy. It'd be fantastic to partner with you in doing that.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Miranda.
Thank you very much, Miranda. And to end, I'd like to thank everyone who took part tonight. I'd like to thank Morgan, Miranda and Paul, and also to our very special guest, Manon, and to Kate. Thank you to Emily and Paul from EmpathyLab, who've been working behind the scenes to make sure that everything worked well. And also thank you to Angharad Sinclair from the Books Council of Wales, who was unable to join us tonight, unfortunately. Thank you very much to everyone for coming tonight, and I hope that you will all enjoy reading the books in the collection and that you'll be involved with the key work that takes place in EmpathyLab over the next few months. Thank you and good evening.